A very good evening to all our viewers. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of The Agenda. My name is Toivan Jabela, your host. Tonight we are joined by two men who have made headlines for a very, very long time as they continue to fight for their rights. That is Phillip Lühl and Guillermo Delgado. They are a same-sex couple that has been fighting for their rights here in Namibia. Gentlemen, thank you for making time. I appreciate really your time to be here.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for the invitation.
Sure. The latest news regarding your family was, of course, that landmark court case a week ago involving your son, Yona, for whom you had been trying to get Namibian citizenship and you couldn't secure that. And the court ruled in favor of your family and ordered the Ministry of Home Affairs to issue Yona with a birth certificate, Namibian birth certificate. What a relief was that for your family? Just to start maybe with you, Guillermo.
Well, it was good news. It was good news, and as you say, it was a long fight. All this started around the time of Yona's birth in 2019. Mm-hmm. So now the decisions are being made of something that started a while back. So this brings good news for now.
Mm-hmm. How was that experience, having to go through that process for a kid as young as that, Phillip?
Well, I think, the judgment really confirmed what we, of course, knew all along, which is that, we are both his parents, Yes. Yeah. Both of us are his parents, from the day of birth. It was a long process that we went through. And so, it was, of course, quite stressful to go through a process that requires you to argue this case of something that is, really blatantly clear, and to and have a lot of insecurities in the process. The fact that he could not get Namibian citizenship and hence also no travel documents, had major implications for us during these last 2 years. That we could not, or he specifically couldn't leave the country. Mm-hmm. And so there were instances where that really created major problems for our family.
Yeah. How, if you can expand a little bit on the effect that it had on the boy, not being able to travel is one element, but what other areas of his life were affected by this? I'm thinking schools, for example, registering him for school and stuff like that. How was he affected?
Well, for starters, neither him or me were able to be there at the birth of the twins that happened earlier this year. That was, of course, something that we accepted as a circumstance, but we planned it to be something that would have not take too long. Unfortunately, as you might know, it took much longer because then later the ministry refused to issue travel documents for the twins to enter the country. So we were 2 months apart. And I'm personally, as a father, I missed the first 2 months of paternity of the twins. And well, Yona didn't see Philip for 2 months, and I can safely say that had an impact on him. That you could see very well when he saw Philip again. You could see that it was affected, and all these things are very kind of personal experiences that are, in essence, the effect of bureaucratic decisions or decisions taken by somebody that have a very real effects on everyday lives of people.
Philip, you were in was it Cape Town?
Durban.
Durban, where Maya and Paula were born, and you stayed in South Africa for a long time. I interviewed you, I think, twice. Just having to be away for that long over this issue, being unable to see your husband, being unable to see Yona, your son, That and I know that when a parent when both parents are present at birth, it's also such a sentimental thing. That must have been very difficult.
Yes, I mean, certainly, like you say, I mean, the first, few hours, days, and weeks in the life of a child are, it's one of the most incredible experiences that you can go through, because it's so all-encompassing, like everything else completely evaporates. You're just there with making sure that you're taking good care of the babies. And so what happened in this case is that we were literally, unfortunately, I had the support of first Guillermo's parents, or mother and sister, to support me, and then later on my mother, who joined me, because of course, with twins, that's like, double the work. But we were literally, bottle feeding. As soon as the twins would sleep, I would do interviews with you and others, write affidavits, run up and down, to get them commissioned. I mean, it was really, extremely intense, the time and the experience. And of course, anything else in terms of concerns evaporated. I could no longer think for a second about work-related issues, about any, other responsibilities or things that I had, because I was simply just, firefighting for literally 2 months. To the extent that we obviously, started making plans to, I mean, if we leave the country, where do we go? What does it take? And so on. And I think, because it was a completely open-ended question, we didn't know if, there would be a resolution to this. Myself not being able to enter Namibia because the twins couldn't, and Guillermo and Yona not being able to exit Namibia because Yona couldn't. So the citizenship case, just to come back to that, really has, those, kind of very, very concrete implications of, what was clearly a case of family separation at the time.
Yeah. Now, there's an element of, there's a very strong financial element to this also, a lot of costs to stay outside your country for that long, to pay lawyers to fight this battle. It costs a lot of money, and it's not a privilege that everybody has. You might have been, maybe you were able to put aside funds for that, but there are people who love each other as much as the two of you do, but who are not in these kind of positions to do this. That is a challenge, Guillermo, for other people in your positions, but who are just maybe less fortunate.
That's why I think it means a lot for us that this is a broader struggle. I think we are using our resources and that we have at hand to open doors for others that might not have the opportunity to actually undergo through all these fights. And I think, especially with the decision last week, the affidavit, the judgment of was really spoke a lot about other things that are that speak more than just the judgment. It speaks about the sexual orientations as a grounds for discrimination. It speaks about the recognition of a same-sex couple to paternity. It speaks about a lot of things, and these are, let me put it this way, small wins that cumulatively pave the way for broader LGBTQ plus equality. And I think that's what also makes it for us worth, that this investment is not something that it's just to save our individual household situation, but I think it means that these efforts are worth for a broader struggle.
Yeah. The Yona judgment, if I can call it that way, it was very poignant in the manner that the Judge Thomas Masuku explained these things. There's so many things, eye-opening aspects that came out of that judgment around the rights of people like yourself who happen to be same-sex and you love each other. You are married to each other, but you didn't get married here because it's not, I I suppose, in law is not permissible in Namibia or whatever the argument is, this Yona judgment could go a long way, Philip, in opening up space for similar things to be actually start happening here in the country, or what do you think?
I think so, because specifically, again, because the judge recognized that the discrimination that was happening in this case could only have been because we are a same-sex couple. So he clearly stated that, in this case, he considered that, the what he called the ugly head of discrimination is, kind of coming above ground and must be chopped off. That's his language. And he specifically referred to sexual orientation. And I think, the big difference, of course, between our constitution and the South African constitution is that in the article where, all the grounds for non-discrimination are mentioned, in the South African constitution, it mentions sexual orientation explicitly, and in the Namibian one, it doesn't. Now, if you now take a narrow sort of interpretation of the constitution, you would simply say, well, it's not mentioned, hence, it's not an issue. But of course, that's not the point of the constitution. The constitution was, crafted, coming from an oppressive history, where some were discriminated against on various grounds, to define that, discrimination shouldn't happen. And then a number of examples were given. But that doesn't mean that whatever is not listed there, is then permissible ground for discrimination. So the fact that that Judge Masuku specifically mentioned sexual orientation in his view to be part of the grounds that should not allow for discrimination is significant, because that gives you a broader view, a broader interpretation of the Constitution. And clearly, the Constitution, he also reiterates, Namibia is a secular state, and there is equality for all. And so that equality must, necessarily extend to all of us, irrespective of our status, our, in this case, sexual orientation. So I think that is the first time in Namibian jurisprudence that this has been recognized. And so if one, like Guillermo was saying, builds onto that, you would then immediately see how so many other issues, would also be clearly unconstitutional in light of this sort of judgment. So, for example, the sodomy law, that is another colonial remnant that we still have on our books, where the argument was that it's not really, people are not being persecuted on the basis of this law. That's the sort of stance, or has been the stance of government all along. But again, I think our cases show that, even though that we were not actively persecuted, the fact that these laws exist and that they create certain understandings in society, discrimination was allowed to happen, and in fact happened. And I think, this being recognized is really a crucial step.
Yeah. Now, we live in a new democracy. Not new democracy, 30 years, 31 years is a long time. So it's no longer really new, and we ought to evolve, I suppose. Guillermo, you coming from Mexico, I don't know for how long same-sex arrangements or marriages have been permissible in law there, but in Namibia, this has been a very controversial issue, if I can call it that way. It's a largely conservative society, and people, even when they see two men seated next together, referring to each other as husbands, to an average Namibian, it's something alien to them. Explain to me just how this is not any different, if at all that is the case, from any other love relationship.
Well, I think that the paradigm of what one would call a conventional family, I would also call it a colonial remnant. I think that the image of, let's say, mom, dad, and sons and daughters, and I think that's one configuration. If one would really take a snapshot of how families in Namibia actually are, we'll find that actually there's many constellations, and it would be unfair to say that a real family is only constituted by a woman, a man, and kids in a sort of monogamous kind of arrangements. The realities I've experienced here are on the one hand side much more diverse. So, for example, family arrangements where you know there's maybe 3 mothers, you know, whether they're in a relationship or not. I think it's really not the point. The point is like a sort of group of people that identify themselves as a sort of unit of care, love, and support, which is so much needed. You know, we're undergoing a crisis of gender-based violence, you know, where you find that the house might not be the safest place for some people to be as a woman, as a child. But then you find other households where there is genuine care, genuine love. And I think it would be unfair to say that because of the composition of the genders or sex of the members of that family, then they're not entitled to recognition, rights, and to, you know, take part in everyday life in this society. I think we need to kind of also like expel this idea of what the family is and recognize a little bit more how we actually are.
Yeah. I'll put the same question to Philip, but only after this short commercial break.
Strike it gold and win 5,000 Namibian dollars in cash with Neo Paints. Simply buy Neo Paints products from the selected range and stand a chance to get one of 12 mystery buckets filled with gold paint. All 12 winners will each get 3 extra paint buckets equal to their purchase. One to replace the gold paint, the second to use on your project, and the third to give to a charity of their choice. One winner can score another 10,000 Namibian dollars by showing us your creative use of the golden paint. The best project wins the cash. Offer is valid from 27 September to 18 December at your favorite hardware store nationwide. Visit us at neopaints.com for more competition details and follow us on Facebook for weekly competition updates. Neo Paints, a coat of excellence.
We continue our conversation with husbands Philip and Guillermo. Philip, just to the same question that I posed earlier before the break, I don't know how to put it, but as a man who just happened to be in love with another man, what is it that people must understand about your situation to say that you're not any different from anyone? The only difference being that you chose to love someone that it's not a common practice here, but I think, I don't even want to say that. Please give me your view.
Yes, I think I would actually say that the first thing to recognize is that sort of, you know, fluid sexual relations were part of, you know, societies the world over, and certainly in this country and on this continent, you know, long before, you know, the colonization of the continent happened. I think, you know, there is this sort of, you know, view that, you know, homosexuality is something that came, you know, with the Western imports. The reality is, if you look at, you know, early anthropologists' work, you know, they were actually quite, you know, astonished by because of course Europe already at that time had, you know, decennia or decades of you know, Christianization and, you know, kind of the, you know, imposed family values that Guillermo was talking about. And they came here and they actually were astonished by the sort of fluidity. So there are anthropological records that, you know, describe a sort of broad range of sexual practices that were quite common and normal and, you know, not really considered outlandish. Then this issue of the, you know, the Christian notion of the nuclear family gets, you know, introduced, and the other, practices were effectively policed by introducing sodomy laws. Of course, those laws were not, laws aimed at the colonists themselves. They were not concerned with themselves. They were concerned with how to control, the indigenous population. So I think once we actually get the the longer sort of historical view on things, we see that, this is nothing new. What is new is that we narrow our definitions of family and of relationships to a certain one. You could paint the same picture with monogamy. We all know that monogamy is also something that is a Christian introduction into our society long time ago. And now we might take it for conventional, but it was not. And in our everyday realities of families, one could safely argue that it still is not. It's just that we don't recognize it as such. And so, for me, the recognition is that that these, this fluidity of interpersonal relationships was always there. And so while one always talks about fighting, for example, our fight for future generations, I would actually like to say we also owe it to our ancestors, if you like, to recognize that they were also, some of them might have been actually inclined in certain ways that they couldn't live because they were policed in certain ways. I'm personally aware of people in my parents' generation that have committed suicide over these things simply because they could not be themselves, and they couldn't even share this with their closest friends. And so in my mind, it's a recognition that that we what is it that we're actually aiming for as a society? If we're aiming to create indeed sort of spaces of of love and care, as Guillermo mentioned it or called it, where children can grow up and become adults in ways that is that is really an environment that actually lets children evolve freely. What is wrong with that? Why must we police which exact sort of form that family takes? So I think, and in my mind, again, the judgment is really a recognition of that, is to say, like, yes, this is also a family. Thank you, let's move on, sort of, because what else is there to say?
Yeah, exactly. Now, one of the, so you are parents to 3 beautiful kids, and they were delivered through, it's called surrogacy. Yeah. How are you going to raise these kids? How, without a mother? How are they going to live knowing this is our parents and there's no void inside ourselves of motherhood, if you like? I have a mother and I love her very much. I don't know how it would have been if I didn't have a mother. But in your case, how do you raise these kids knowing that they don't have a mother but still give them that life that satisfies them even without a mother, a biological mother, if you like?
Well, I think that that they will grow up with also many mothers, because we are our household is very busy. We have a lot of support from family and friends, and they are always very happy to come and play with the kids and be there for them in ways more than just a simple visit. Yeah. Now, of course, mother as a sort of role. My work professionally deals more with issues of urban development, housing, informal settlement upgrading, and in my work I did significant number of interviews with different households, and it was amazing to see that I probably never found a household where there were actually that kind of fitted, like mom, dad, and so on. In some cases, the head of household was the grandmother. Now, this grandmother performed perhaps the role of the caretaker, but I'm pretty sure that in many households where there's maybe two aunts, or maybe why not like a single father that might have, for example, have adopted or might have simply just have lost his wife prematurely. I mean, all these family constellations need to be recognized. And I think, I think that I'm pretty sure there's many also cases that prove the other point. People that have a mother and they hate each other, that they never see each other, or that they have a very kind of toxic relationship. I think we have to speak about relationships of care and relationship of love and affection that kind of can create this kind of society that we would like to see of acceptance, tolerance, and nurturing, rather than the violence that we are seeing today.
Yeah, it's a good point. Philip, when Maya, Paula, and Leona go to school, and as is with kids in their nature, they ask, who is your mother? What would they likely to say?
Well, we might not yet be at that stage. I mean, Yona is now, 2.5 years old.
Yes.
But definitely as he grows up, we will fully acknowledge, where he's from, right? Of course, in a way that is appropriate to his age. But for example, we have, still a relationship with not only the surrogate mother, but her entire family. Remember that surrogate mothers have to have their own children, so they, going into a pregnancy, they do it knowing fully well what it means. So we have that relationship. Of course, they live in Durban, so it's not a sort of extremely close relationship, but we have that relationship. He already knows, Yona already knows her name. He recognizes her on the, on the images. Now, of course, he doesn't know that she's his surrogate mother and so on, but he already knows the person. So for him, it's normal. She's there. She has a meaning, right? Now, once he grows up, we'll all the time keep on building on that narrative and say like, yeah, so she carried you, this and this happened, whatever. There's of course also the biological mother, which is the egg donor, which we don't know the identity of. That's the way that South African law stands, that egg donation is anonymous. But we have a picture of her as a toddler. Now that is something that we're just going to share with him and say like, look, she, and so it just becomes part of his life. And for him, growing up, of course, it's the most normal thing, in the same way that it is the most normal thing that he doesn't have a mother, but many women and men that are around him, that take care of him. This sort of adage that it takes a village to raise a child, I think in our case is completely true. I mean, it takes so many people, and because of that, and also because of this resistance to focus on the nuclear family, it is for him very easy to be with somebody else, without having to cry that we are not there or something. So he has a very open relationship to people because he just sees you and then he's interested. It's not what your role is or what your name is or your title or whatever. So, and I think that is probably true for most children. I think the problem comes in if we want to hide certain facts, and we, because, as you say, obviously, at some, point in time, he will want to understand, like, okay, so how did this all work? And we'll just simply have a whole archive with newspaper articles, interviews, and so on. It's like, look, do your research. There it is, It's all there. So, so I really see it as part of the, the overall process of growing up.
Yeah. There's a pending court case still. It's more your case, yes, Guillermo, and that is around your marriage to Phillip. And if I remember the correct thing, the fact that your marriage, I suppose, is not formally recognized in this country. But given that ruling, the Yona ruling, which has essentially said we can no longer discriminate people on the basis of being same-sex couple, do you think that helps your case a little bit also? In fact, maybe refresh my memory. What are you arguing there?
Yes, so there's a second case. The second case was about my immigration status in the country. So I've been here for 11 years. Initially, the first years I was here with a work permit, but at some stage we decided that it was, we would like to present ourselves as a couple to the state and basically apply for domicile to kind of cement a little bit more our life here in Namibia. So which we did. I applied for a domicile, which is the permit that normally is given to those who are married to a Namibian citizen. So there's some nuances that status, you get it through that way and through other different steps that we also argued for. And I was, and this is status that the state recognizes. So it's not, strictly speaking, an application, but I got domicile status in 2018. And as I was renewing the certificate, you don't renew the status, you just renew the certificate that you get when you get domicile. The ministry decided that they would not issue a new one. They said that that it was a mistake that they did and so on. So at that point, I basically, and it was done in a very violent way. I was in essence pushed out of the country by an immigration official while I was on holidays with my sister. So that was not only a sort of arbitrary act, but also a violation of, just simply administrative justice, which is an article in the Constitution. So we fought back. I found my way back to the country. And then that case was February 2020. We went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled against us. So we took it. The High Court, yes, sorry. The High Court ruled against us, and we took it to the Supreme Court. That case was heard coincidentally also last week on Monday. And I have a good feeling, but of course it is for the Supreme Court to decide on that matter, which deals both, as I said, with domicile and also with the treatment that one gets as a sort of foreigner or a non-Namibian in the country. And I think that those two aspects will be at stake in this ruling.
I think in conclusion, gentlemen, Philip, what is it? You are a Namibian citizen. What is it that you want to see your country do going forward as far as people like yourself who are in the same-sex marriages or same-sex relationships are concerned? The conversation has gone on for too long. The legality question always arises. Everybody have their own view, and unfortunately, obviously, we cannot accommodate every view. There are religious people who are saying it's unchristian. There are traditionalists who say no, in our tradition, in our culture, that is a what is the English word? It's abomination and stuff like that. What is it as a Namibian citizen that you would like to see going forward?
Of course, what I would have liked to see, not only going forward, but in the past 30 years, is that, in the best of the cases, our parliament would have made, sure that it gives effect to the aims of the Constitution to have equality for all, and institute, kind of repeal all those discriminatory laws, and in fact institute, equal rights for all. That is what we would have wished to see, and that was what I was still wish to see. But of course, given those dynamics that you just sketched, we also know that it might not be the majority view. But what I, want to state very clearly is that, protection of minority rights cannot be at the will of the majority. It has to be based on the Constitution, which lays out very clearly that, everybody is equal, that we're a secular state, and that, somebody's religious views cannot infringe on my rights simply, because that person might belong to the majority. So. And that is why, in this case, we need the courts to make that determination. If Parliament, as the sort of legislating body, doesn't, then our courts must step in, and they must, safeguard and give effect to what is in the Constitution. Because I totally agree with you that, obviously, in our case, we have the privilege to access the law, But if you cannot do that, then you have no justice. So there might be, we might have an independent judiciary, and all kinds of processes. But if you can't access them, then then you're simply lost. And so, justice can never be a matter of access, of especially financial economic access. It must be available to all. And so, what I'm hoping is that our cases and all the other cases, there's about 9 or 11, I don't even know, other cases that deal with other aspects of LGBTQ plus recognition, that altogether these bring incremental change to the point that at some point Parliament will say, like, okay, we have to legislate, because in a way that is even what happened in South Africa, even where there was explicit mention of sexual orientation in the Constitution. It took another 10 years of intense litigation and struggles before Parliament said, like, okay, stop it, Equal Marriage Act, and this is it, and let's move on. So I really would hope that we can reach a point where each and every individual in this country can thrive, and not be hindered by issues that are really of personal nature, right? And that should not concern, the general public or anybody else. How certain individuals lead their lives and structure their families.
Indeed. Gentlemen, in the interest of time, I must thank you very much for coming through and for sharing your frank and very personal experiences. I hope that will give a lot of perspectives to a lot of people out there.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, that was the agenda for tonight. Thank you for watching and good night.